Ryan McSweeney.
Ryan McSweeney.
Technical artist, animator extraordinaire.
Oh, thank you. I also work here at Harmonix.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I'll just start talking about like my career, my experience, and how I got here to Harmonix. Feel free to stop me at any point if you guys have any questions or anything like that.
Okay.
Okay. Again, my name is Melissa. I'm an animator here at Harmonix. And I guess my career started really with architecture because I was really into architecture when I was in high school.
Me too.
Really? Nice. And then I went to some university in New York to have like this summer program for architecture. And I ended up doing really well in the class, but for me, it was so boring. It just wasn't for me. So I didn't end up being too interested in it. So I took a leap of faith and I went into animation, which I've never really like at the time understood much about it. I just knew that, ooh, I like cartoons and I really like to draw. So I just went for it. So then I went to Philadelphia University for animation. And I had Jeff here as my professor. It was awesome experience. And during my junior year, I was lucky enough to get an internship at DreamWorks. So I spent the summer there. And it was a very interesting experience because, you know, I thought I was like, oh, I'm like awesome now. I got it. I'm working at DreamWorks. Oh my God, I'm like the best. But then when I actually got there, I found out that, oh my God, I still had so much more to learn. I was surrounded by so many talented people and I got so stressed out, like, oh no, I need to like study more and work harder and all that. So I kept that in mind throughout the whole internship and I tried to like absorb as much information as I could. And then after I graduated from Philadelphia University, I went to online school for a year and a half. I did Animation Mentor. And through there, I met a ton of other animators from a ton of different studios, and I worked really hard. I focused on character animation, and it was an awesome experience, and I learned so much from it. And it was an online class, which is a little weird, at least for me. And then throughout that time, I also took another leap of faith, and I moved to Seattle, just so, hey, maybe I could just, if I'm on the West Coast, I could just absorb that energy and be like, oh, I'll get a job somewhere here. So I'm just gonna go for it. And at the time I lived in New Jersey. So I moved across country for there and I spent like about 6 months there. And then at this time now, I graduated from Animation Mentor and I'm still like struggling to get my first job. It took a while. But then I finally got my first job at this company called IP Keys Technologies, back in New Jersey. So I had to move all the way back to basically like an hour from where I was originally, which was great. But that was my first like animation job experience there. And IP Keys is a military company. And the game we worked on was, I think it was called iGame. And it was mainly for the military to use to like, hey, before you actually go out into the field, play this game so you can learn how to use, you know, how to properly handle a gun or some like IED devices or tanks and like different stuff like that. So it was used for them for training. You want to turn on the air?
It's a bit warm in here.
It's very warm in here, so give us a second. We have a blow it away. All right, so I'm sorry if you guys could hear that. So yeah, so I was there for about 2 years. I definitely learned a lot. A lot of my work there was hand-keyed animation. So I did a lot of like first-person stuff and like full-body walk cycles and things like that. And then after the 2 years, we actually lost government funding. So almost the entire team, and we were small. It was like at max maybe 20 people, but the entire team got laid off. So I was back to, you know, looking for a job again. I was like, oh, I don't know where I'm going to go. And then, so I was looking for a job for like 6 months. And then I finally got a contract position here at Harmonix for the summer. And when I got here, it was amazing. I feel like this is probably my first real animation job like in the industry. And I learned a lot and I did not want to leave, but my contract was only like 3 months. So I just did the best that I could until the end. And then right at the end when I was supposed to be done, they extended me for another month. So I was like, oh, this is great. I'm just going to stay for another month, but I have no place to stay. So I ended up staying in an Airbnb for like a month, which is very expensive, especially in Boston. So I did that. I was like, it's okay. I'm just going to hope for the best. I'll stay here another month. It'll be fine. And then at the end of that extra month, finally, I got offered a full-time position. And I've been here ever since. I've been here for almost 3 years now. And yeah, it's been great so far. Let me see here. So I can talk about sort of like an average day for me as an animator here. So our work schedule is pretty flexible here. Like most people could choose their hours, but the core hours are probably like 10 to 6. And so that's what I do, 10 to 6. Some people do like 8 to 4:30 or 9 to 5 or whatever. But that's usually the normal hours for me. And every day in the morning we have a stand-up or a daily where the whole team gets together. If you're on a project, that whole team gets together and talk about, okay, these are the tasks I'm going to do today. And then everyone goes through the room and they say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then I just animate the rest of the day. Luckily, I don't have too many meetings right now, so I really get to work a lot, which is what I love to do. Once a week, we usually have like an art meeting. So all like the other artists on a project get together and we could review and critique everyone's work. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I guess something else I could add are some surprises that I've learned throughout like my career here. At first, you know, starting off as an animator, I really wanted to be, oh, I want to work for Pixar and DreamWorks and Blue Sky and like all these really ginormous companies because that's all I knew about. But then I slowly learned more and more about game animation, and I've always been a gamer. That's my hobby. That's what I love to do. And at least here at Harmonix, because we're sort of like a medium-sized studio-ish, you really get to do like the art and the technical side of things. So, you know, you get to shoot like mocap or clean up an animation and polish it up. And then I also get to like implement it into the game and make sure it works with the characters, make sure everything's blending properly and working as intended. And I really like that side of things. So really gaming animation is probably where I was always meant to end up in. Let's see. One of the first games I worked on here was Rock Band VR, and it was my first VR experience. And working in VR has a very interesting challenge because the characters, you can view them from like any angle and you want to make sure that they look right and that they look really realistic and natural, because you can't really fake that stuff. Especially my old job with the first person shooter stuff and like the military job, everything was like at a specific angle, so I could like cheat a lot of stuff. But in VR, you can't do that. So you have to make sure everything is polished up really nicely. So yeah, VR was definitely a challenge that I didn't expect to go through. And then I guess also like I love my job. I love being an animator, but it's still work. And it's still like, I have some days where I'm like, oh, I don't want to go into work. You know, I just want to like stay home and play with my cats. So, but it's still very, very hard work. So it's like, any of you guys are like interested in animation specifically, know that it's like, oh, it's a lot of fun, but it's also very, very hard and a lot of work as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Some of my stuff might fill in the gaps if you.
Yeah. I have like some notes here, but.
All right. So again, my name's Ryan McSweeney. I've been working in the games industry since 2011. It's just about a decade. I've been primarily working as a technical artist. The glares.
Yeah, do you want to pull it down?
I know.
Sorry, we're like in a hot box right now. It's really hot.
Okay. So the job title of technical artist is very broad and it's kind of an umbrella that covers many sub-definitions of tech art. So you could be rigging characters. You could be working on R&D for graphics or pieces of tech to put in the game. You could be working on making materials and shaders, more performance. You could be making art tools via scripting or programming, depending on how sophisticated you want to be. It encompasses a lot, and it makes sense because it's such a vague and strange title. It has other names like character technical director, technical animator, and probably a half dozen more. I worked at another Boston area company called Turbine shortly after I graduated from school. Turbine is now known as Warner Brothers Boston, Warner Brothers Games Boston, but they started Dungeons and Dragons Online, the MMO, and Lord of the Rings Online, also an MMO. I worked on both of those here and there, but the largest project I worked on was a DC Comics themed MOBA. So think of League of Legends or Dota or Smite, except you can be Batman and Catwoman. There's a lot of character rating that went into that job, and I was working on it for probably like 2.5 years. The project got sunsetted a bit early, but it was tough to get into that gaming market with the lion's share going to League of Legends and a few other big players. So around the time that game was sunsetted, I had learned plenty, including some Python scripting, a lot more about skinning characters, creating workable rigs, just working on my craft here and there in the different sub-disciplines. But I was very sort of complicated layoff situation, but I was essentially given a month of notice before I was going to be let go, which allowed me to. That's
awesome.
Yeah, it's unheard of. Really.
Yeah, that does not happen. Usually you just get cut off. You're like, okay,
yeah.
Last day, you're done.
They'll usually tell you the day that they want you to leave, sometimes the hour. So I was able to work on my reel, which after over half a year of unemployment, I landed at Harmonix through the recommendation of a former Turbine coworker of mine. And I happened to, there happened to be a technical artist opening after one of their like decade-long tech artists decided to leave for another company. And lucky me, I got to join Rock Band VR as well, working on characters again. That's been most of my work at the studio is character-related, which I love. I just had my 4-year anniversary on February 1st. So this is the longest job I've ever had. Outside of work, outside of Harmonix, I teach 1 semester a year at Emerson College down the street. They have a very small animation and games program, but I teach advanced computer animation, which I've decided to focus solely on the principles of animation. Very important. Instead of going too much into the technical end, we kind of do modules about, well, if you want to learn to rig, we can do like a leg. We'll start out slow. People want, you know, more like semi-related tangential stuff like unwrapping, prepping for texturing, maybe lighting or camera work. We can do that, but primarily I wanted to focus on the art of animation as opposed to its specific use in games or what have you. I also do, there's I believe it's nationwide, there's like Skills USA competition that happens every year. It's a high school tier, like computer animated short thing that I judge the Massachusetts chapter in, which is coming up in May. I take on some freelance contracts here and there, mostly rigging. I don't get to do too much animation, paid animation work, but it is absolutely a passion of mine, you know, aside from, I guess, the college teaching job. But I work with animators every day, like Melissa, on full body characters, face rigs, the animation tech that in the game engine that we're using, which could be Unreal or Unity or a proprietary engine. I do my best to help solve problems instead of create them, which is also part of my job, is creating problems. It's very rewarding. I wake up every morning thankful for my job, and I'm surrounded by creatives all the time. It gives me energy to go home and work on non-digital craft. And I'm still, you know, finding where exactly that's going, but you know, I'm in my early 30s, and that's probably the way the rest of the decade's gonna go.
You mean you don't spend your time playing video games?
I'm a terrible gamer. I don't know what happened over the last 10 years, but I play maybe one game a month, which is strange to me. Yeah. As much as I love them and making them, they have to really, you know, hit the nail on the head for me to pick it up. But yeah, I'd be great for questions. If there.
Yeah. You guys have any questions or anything for us?
Well, let me, so I have some questions that they prepared earlier, but I want to ask if they have any right now. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I noticed in your about.
Could you project a bit more? We're having
I'll
We're
repeat
having
it.
a little trouble hearing you guys.
All right, the microphone is up further in the classroom, so I'll repeat her question to you, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Okay, yeah, great question. So when you were in Intern at DreamWorks, Melissa, you talked about how you struggled a bit because you were comparing yourself to the other artists around you. Do you have any advice to give about when you're in situations like that? It's kind of funny because last week they just had like a community discussion about like imposter syndrome when you don't feel wrong, right? So that's I think that's kind of what you're referring to, right? So yeah, so can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I'm definitely have had my fair share of like imposter syndrome, especially at DreamWorks. Yeah, I mean, it's hard because when you're surrounded by so many talented people, it might depend on like your personality, but like for me, I definitely like just kept comparing myself. Like, oh, these people are like amazing. Like they could do these amazing, beautiful things. And like, while during my internship, I got to attend their dailies for all their animation shots. And it's the same as our stand-up. They would just get together in a room and go through each shot and like critique it a little bit. And I don't know, it was very, very hard for me to like look at all that and be like, can I actually do that? Like, I don't think I can actually animate something that beautiful, you know? But like over time, I've learned that like everyone comes from different backgrounds. Everyone has their own experience and their own skill levels. And like, you have to just focus on yourself and do the best that you can do instead of like comparing yourself to other people. And I think I didn't really reach that point in my life until I went to GDC. which is a game developers conference in San Francisco. And it's a huge conference for a bunch of game devs to get together, and they talk about the games that they've made. And while I was there, we had an animation workshop where a ton of animators from all over the industry, from Sony and from DreamWorks and like Riot and like everywhere, like a bunch of animators were together in this one room. And we actually talked about imposter syndrome too, and it's a thing that everyone goes through. Like everyone thinks that they suck and they could do better, and like they're not as good as like the next animator. And it wasn't until I reached that moment that I really, because I assume that other people feel this way too, but seeing it firsthand and seeing other people say like, oh, totally, like I see other people's work in other video games, and like I see beautiful stuff like The Last of Us, where it's like it's basically a movie in a video game, and it's like, can I do that? I don't think I can. But it's something that everyone goes through, and feeling that and knowing that and seeing that firsthand really made me feel better about myself, and it made me feel like, okay, I actually belong here. I am talented. I am a game developer, and I'm good at my job, and everyone is good at their job, and we all deserve to be here. It definitely took me a while to get to that point. But yeah, it's something that everyone goes through, and it's tough.
Thank you.
It is very real. It is absolutely very real.
Yeah.
I recently heard a different take on imposter syndrome. And feel free to not subscribe to this at all, but if you fake someone out and they think that you're doing awesome stuff, then good for you. You got them. Your skill set, perceived by others, has been enough to like at least convince them in some way that you're competent in certain areas. And that alone could be the catalyst to them opening up trust to you in different areas, and you have these opportunities that you might not have otherwise. And if everyone is kind of, suffering from this imposter syndrome, just like put a little bit of confidence behind it and the willingness to mess up 10 times before you get it right. And you can extract that from your daily worries, because there's plenty to worry about on the daily, and just recognize that you have to keep growing and learning, and there is no plateau. Don't ever expect to peak. Keep peaking. That way you just keep peak every year, and then you'll be great by the time you're ready to be done with everything.
Thanks. Yeah, that was a good question. Does anyone else have any questions, or I can go through your list here that you guys compiled? James, did you have one? No. Okay, sure. Just out of curiosity, who here is interested, just possibly going into the games industry in some fashion? Maybe as an animator. Okay, we've got a good number of people here. Okay, so some of the questions that we got have to do with the process of making games, right? And so you've talked about working on games for years, right? And so I know it's kind of like a movie. It can be a super long process. So, maybe if you could just give us like really short overview of kind of what the process, when it goes from like concept to, distribution, like what are the different steps? And then where are you on that process?
Great question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, go.
Similar to the animation industry, it's going to happen in these larger chunks, like you said, starting with concept. A very small team will start to do research and development in parallel with exploration of mechanics. So what's the game going to feel like in a really basic sense without all that beautiful art wrapped over it? Narrative-based stuff, hashing out how much money the game costs, which is usually in the tens of millions, depending on how big you are or how small you are. Pre-production goes on for a while, which is where that R&D really comes in handy. Understanding the performance limits of the platform that you're launching on is important. Production begins after you feel confident that you can make this game without all the specifics that come later. And then production is where, you know, the two of us tend to shine the most, figuring out problems and doing lots of work for a pretty long amount of months.
Yeah. And as an animator, I usually don't even enter like a project until they're like into production, where there's models like already made and like stuff for me to actually work on. So I'm definitely like one of the later additions to a project.
And you know, after all the art's made and the designs are polished and the code is cleaned up, you go into various stages of approvals with whoever might be publishing it, alpha, beta, and then what used to be referred to as gold master when they actually had physical copies of games printed on CDs. Not so much anymore, rarely. There's a lot of legal hurdles, and you know, the executives kind of carry a lot of the weight toward the end regarding distribution and marketing. Marketing is a huge thing for your game, arguably very important to getting the word out successfully. And you know, depending on if your project intends to ship with DLC or expansion packs, or you have a sequel in the works, that might affect how you market it, or the cadence of your next project, or what type of tech you are able to reuse. Yeah, and then people ideally enjoy the game, and you make money, and you have a job in the next couple months.
Yeah, and that process is different for like every project. Like we had one of our VR games that just came out, Audica. I feel like they had a really short production period, like maybe like a couple of months or something. It wasn't long at all. But then like some games like could take like 2 or 3 years to actually go out into the world. So it really depends per project and like how complicated and how much work is needed to make that idea complete.
Sure. So besides animator and technical artists or TD, what are some of the other art roles that you have, you know, that are, you know, part of the pipeline?
So we have concept artists, right? So they usually like get like the look of the game ahead of time, and of the characters as well. What other artists?
User interface and user
UX. UI artists.
Yeah. So creating all the buttons and the framework of how the user may interact with the game itself. The shell that gets overlaid over all the, you know, the environment behind it, menus, etc. Character artists, typically, or 3D generalists, could be modeler, texturer, they could be sculpting. Depending on the size of your studio, you might be assigned one of those. Our studio artists typically need to handle all of that whole process. Definitely.
I think that's it. I mean, we're a pretty, like, as far as like comparing for other studios, we're pretty like medium to small size. So we have a lot of people who do like they wear multiple hats, you know, and they touch a bunch of stuff, especially like the character artists we do. Like they model it, they texture it, and put it all together as far as art goes.
Special effects.
Special effects. Visual effects. That's true.
All the explosions and fireworks and
particles and all the like the fancy stuff. Fancy, very expensive.
Yes.
So,
we all have to hold each other accountable to make high quality art, but also at very low cost.
Yeah.
Which, you know, it's almost like its own mini industry.
Yeah, because I mean, I was familiar with Turbine because that's been around for a long time, and you know, they had texture artists, environmental artists, they had character artists who specialized in just kind of humanoid characters, and then character artists who specialized in like creatures and that sort of thing. So I guess it really depends on the production and the size of the company, like how specialized those different roles are.
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I got to rig up some crazy like dungeon crawling creatures, and it was probably some of my most favorite time at that company. just weird, gnarly green and purple multi-legged things.
Yeah, so speaking of, like, what are some of your favorite projects that you've worked on?
Well, I can't say, like, we're working on stuff right now that is definitely super, super exciting and very fun. Obviously, we can't say anything about that, but that would probably be like my favorite project. But as far as stuff that we've done in the past, I actually really enjoyed Dance Central VR, which is a different VR game that we made for the Oculus Rift and the Quest. And especially like animation wise, that the whole premise of that game is that you dance with like a partner in front of you, and they're sort of like teaching you how to dance as you move around. So the whole game is about the characters. And so that was very, very rewarding for me, that basically everyone gets to see my work whenever they play that game. And it was really fun to like just work on a bunch of choreography. And
did you have to shoot reference of yourself doing it? Did you have to take lessons, or like?
Definitely not. I am not a dancer.
Melissa got top 3 scores in the office like all the time.
I mean, I had to play the game a bunch to be the animation, so I got pretty good at it. But no, at least for that project, we outsourced our dancers or choreographers. So I think for that game, we brought in 3 dancers, and they each had like a certain amount of songs that they had to choreograph. So we would bring them in, and then we have a mocap studio in here, and they would suit up, and we would put the markers on them and everything, and then we would mocap their actions. And then from there, we would take that data and then put it into a motion builder, which is an animation software. And then we would just clean up the animation, cut it up, and make sure it's all polished and nice, and then put that into the game. So I definitely did not have to dance or do anything like that. We had other people dancing. I just used their like mocap body data for that.
I don't know if you were aware of this, but so last year the Franklin Institute had a video game exhibit where they had basically video games from like the very, very beginning, like all the way up to the most recent games, indie games. It was just like a playable exhibit. You could just walk through for hours and play these different games. And Dance Central was one of like the premier kind of games that they had. Not the VR one, but the, you know, just kind of like.
They're like your original Dance Central, yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
On that exhibit. Yeah.
What about you? What about a favorite game that you worked on?
Now that you've mentioned the mocap stuff, I've got to put on the suit for non-dancing related reasons. We'll have narrative cutscenes that are voiced by professionals, but in order to cut down on overhead for like contracting people to find talent to essentially walk around and do like body mimicry, they'll just have internal people like donate 4 hours of a workday and do some narrative cutscenes. So I've got to be, I was the body motion for Oblio, which is one of the NPCs in our new Dance Central game. And I've put it on for a few other things, which I can't talk about.
We're super excited for what
yes.
we're working on right now. So everyone in the studio is very excited for this.
Yeah, I definitely.
When are we going to be able to see that, what you're working on now?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Sorry, when are we going to be able to see what you're working on?
Well, one of them is actually being announced, hopefully, if everything goes well, at PAX East, right? It's announced.
It's like very soon.
Very, very, very soon, if all goes well. That's one of them, and then it's a different project that's still very early, so no idea when that one will be out, if ever. I mean, things get cut all the time. You never know. But yeah, we're really excited for one's coming out, hopefully in like 2 weeks.
Nice. So you mentioned a couple, like some of your tools that you had, using mocap and kind of software, motion builder. What are some of the other software tools that you use in your work? either, maybe you use it rarely or maybe use it every day? What are some of the different tools you use for your work?
Sure. So for me, definitely Motion Builder is a big bulk of what I use, especially since a lot of the stuff I work on currently is mocap. And Motion Builder is perfect for that. I also use a bunch of Maya, and then Perforce. Perforce is like how do you explain?
Version control.
Yeah, it's like a version control thing. Everyone at the studio uses that. And then my current project, we use Unreal Engine 4, UE4, which is an awesome engine. I love like I don't know if you guys are aware of like Unity and UE4. They're like the free gaming game engines that anyone can use. And I've had experience in both, and with definitely UE4 is a lot more artist friendly. And that's, I love UE4, so I definitely have a lot of fun with that. What else do I use?
There's plugins for a lot of the software that are either developed by like Autodesk first party or third party. I don't know how often you use Studio Library, but I came across it today again.
Never use that.
Like if you want to enhance your app experience, there's a lot of community content out there, which I highly recommend exploring. Free scripts, free models, free rigs. If you're savvy enough, there's free animations out there you could retarget onto your own character.
Oh yeah.
Like if you want a background person just walking around and you don't really want to pay too much mind to it, slap something else on there. I'm primarily in Autodesk Maya for my character rigging. I use Motion Builder a bit as like a bridge to the animators for these particular projects, which involve mocap.
Mm-hmm.
Unreal 4 is also a great tool for if you want to build your environments and bring your animations in there. People have made like gorgeous films that run real time in that engine as animated shorts. They're not games. You just press play once and it'll go through, the 3-minute thing that you made. They're really popping up everywhere. And they're trying to flex how strong of a tool it is. And it's not just for games.
Oh yeah.
It's being used for so much more. Yeah, they have a lot of money too, so they can kind of like make whatever they want.
It's like Fortnite, right? They're the company behind UE4 is Epic Games, and they made Fortnite. So there's a lot of money in Fortnite right now.
Yeah, they pulled in a few pennies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, if any of you guys are interested in any like gaming stuff or like lighting things or like anything really creative like that, UE4 is free and it's so valuable to know. Recently in the studio, we didn't actually use UE4. We used our proprietary software, but recently we've been like venturing out into UE4, and a lot of people are starting or have had to learn how to use it. So if you could get a head start on that, hell yeah.
You talked a little bit about, Melissa, you like to play games outside of work. Like what kind of things inspire you? What are the games that inspire you, or what are the movies that inspire you, or what are the shows or books or whatever? What inspires you guys?
Sure. For me, I love when games can do lip sync really well. And I feel like a lot of games do not do that well. So I'm on the lookout for that. And also just any game that just have beautiful motion. Like if you guys have ever seen Monster Hunter, the monsters and like the character in there, they're beautiful. It's insane. And like I play that game because I enjoy it, but also because it's just a beautiful game. I play a bunch of World of Warcraft. I play a bunch of Overwatch. I play a bunch of Pokemon. I do a lot of just random games on my PC. Yeah, it's mainly just video games that I find my main inspiration from. Yeah. What about you?
I love a gorgeous art direction. In a game, it would have to still intrigue me mechanics wise, but I think if it's gorgeous enough to, you know, get my $10 or $20, I think props to them. I dabble mostly in like smaller titles, indie stuff, occasional AAA games, outside of games and animated shorts. I'm trying to get my hands dirty with more traditional stuff, like upcycling found objects and, you know, painting stuff, gluing things together. Ideally, if I could just see something that inspires me to like start some small weekend project. Got a lot of things that are unfinished, but I don't really mind too much about that. Finishing everything, I think, is unachievable. So it's more about the process for me. And having at least experienced what might be a failure in someone else's eyes is giving me a skill set to go on and keep creating, you know, art in other ways that I wouldn't have known that I didn't like before. Or that I do like, or I love, you know?
Yeah. I also watch a bunch of movies, and I try to watch almost every, like, new animation film that just came out. And I just saw Sonic recently, and it was pretty good. It was okay. But I felt like I needed to see it because, I don't know if you guys have heard, but you probably have seen, but the original, like, character design for Sonic did not go over well with like the internet, and they had to redesign it, and I just feel for those artists and like having to just redo a whole character like that. It's a lot of work. So I felt like I had to see that, and yeah, it was a good movie. I also watched a ton of anime too.
Oh, I dabble.
Yeah, here and there.
Was it the one that came out, the series that came out on Netflix, like Love, Death, and Robots?
Oh yes, very good, very violent and not safe for work, but also very good.
Yeah, there was like a dozen animated shorts of varying adult-themed topics, and they're all enjoyable in their own ways. Lots of different art styles. It probably gave a lot of small studios the opportunity through however Netflix is paying for this to get their stuff out there. It's seen by the world. Arguably, maybe their first like little blip on the map.
Yeah.
I think those were stellar.
Yeah, and those were great because it was like 2D stuff, like very cartoony, to like hyper realistic animation, and like the effects were amazing, and it was a great show.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Yeah, we're kind of coming to the end of class. So thank you so much for your time.